Well, hello, and welcome to a venting seminar or a venting YouTube session here. So, if you don't like emotionally expressive um, exposures, probably you want to avoid this one. This is not a productive video. This is just venting video. I just spoke with a parent advocate over in Europe, and it's just so frustrating. Everybody doing everything is just incredibly frustrating. And so before returning back to my work, I need to kind of clear off some of that. And so I, rather than pace around my place for a while and vent to myself, I figured I'd document my venting and put it here. The fundamental feature that's happening, and this was related to Denmark. The fundamental feature is they're doing these interventions. They can't get these cases out into the mental health system. They don't apply the mental health system to these cases. They move them into the court system, and they don't diagnose what the pathology is. And that's true everywhere. Okay. They do not diagnose the pathology. And what has me just insanely frustrated is that in all of healthcare, diagnosis guides treatment. The treatment for cancer is different than the treatment for diabetes. And so here we have a problem. The first step is to identify what that problem is. That's called a diagnosis. These three words mean exactly the same thing. Diagnosis means identify, pathology means problem, treatment means fix it. So we must first diagnose what the pathology is before we know how to fix it or treat it. We must first identify what the problem is before we know how to fix it. So if you come in and just try to start fixing things without having first identified what the problem is, bad things are going to happen. Let me give you some examples. You have a broken car. Your car is making noises. It's not working properly. You take the car to your auto mechanic. Your auto mechanic changes the transmission. You says, "What was my transmission problem?" He says, "I don't know. I didn't identify what the problem was with the car. I just took out your transmission and changed it." You ask a plumber to come over your house to fix your sink. The plumber goes in and changes your toilet. He said, "My toilet's not broken." What are you doing? He says, "Oh, I don't identify what the problem is. I just come in and start fixing things." You have a medical problem. Okay, an upset stomach. You go into your doctor. You go into the doctor to say, "I've got this upset stomach." The doctor says, "Okay, we're going to put you on 6 rounds of chemotherapy." You go, "Do I have cancer?" The doctor says, "I don't know. I don't diagnose what the problem is before I prescribe my treatments. We're going to put you on 6 rounds of chemotherapy." No one ever does that except in the family courts. You folks in the family courts, you professional folks, the judges, the attorneys, the minors' counsel, the GAL, the psychologists, the reunification therapists, the parenting coordinators, all of you do not identify what the problem is before you start trying to fix it. Parents, you come to me and start saying, "How do we fix the problem?" And I say, "What's the diagnosis?" And you tell me there is no diagnosis. And I say, "Then we need to get one, because that's the problem. We don't know what to do to fix the problem until we first identify what that problem is. Do you need your toilet fixed, or do you need your sink fixed? Do you need your transmission fixed, or do you need your carburetor fixed? Were we talking about cancer or diabetes? The treatment for cancer is massively different than the treatment for diabetes. And if we treat cancer with insulin, the patient dies from the misdiagnosed cancer. When a child is rejecting a parent, okay, that's an attachment pathology. The only attachment system is a motivational system that always motivates the child to bond to a parent. The symptom of a child seeking to flee a parent, a child rejecting a parent, is caused by child abuse, either by that parent, in which case it's an authentic attachment pathology caused by authentic child abuse to the child, or it's a false or factitious attachment pathology imposed on the child by a narcissistic, borderline dark personality parent who is collapsing into persecutory delusions around the divorce situation. So that's our concern, child abuse by one parent or the other. So you know what I recommend? That we assess and diagnose which parent is abusing the child so that we know whether our treatment plan should be to protect the child from this parent or from this parent. Because if we make a wrong decision, we're going to send the child to be with an abusive parent because we haven't taken the time to identify which parent is abusing the child. And it's always one parent or the other for this particular symptom. Because, another reason, just because, attachment pathology. There's three types of insecure attachment. There's secure, and then there's three problematic attachments: anxious ambivalent, anxious avoidant, and disorganized. Anxious ambivalent is high protest, anxious avoidant is low protest. Both of those are trying to elicit the involvement of the parent, taking different strategies. Disorganized attachment is the child shows no organized strategy to bond to the parent. The cause of disorganized attachment is either abusive or psychotic range parenting, creating no organized strategy to bond to that parent. A child rejecting a parent, seeking to flee a parent, represents no organized strategy to bond to that parent. That's a disorganized attachment caused by either abusive or psychotic range parenting. So the question becomes, is the targeted rejected parent abusing the child in some way, in which case our treatment plan needs to fix that problem? Or is it the allied narcissistic borderline dark personality who has a delusional disorder, a psychotic disorder, who is psychologically abusing the child by creating this factitious disorder imposed on the child? Child psychological abuse. Which parent is causing the child's symptoms, the disorganized attachment? I would strongly recommend you identify which parent is abusing the child before you start making decisions, any decisions, about the child. So let's get this out to a diagnosis and treatment plan. That just kills me. It just kills me. Everywhere else in society, everywhere else in healthcare, we identify what the problem is before we start trying to fix things. Except in the family courts. You people just are insane in the family courts. The other feature about this pathology, it's a ripple of sex abuse. That's what this pathology is. It's not sex abuse in this generation. It is transgenerational transmission of sex abuse trauma. One of the features of sex abuse, I've worked sex abuse, I've come out of child abuse and trauma. That's my world. I'm a child abuse psychologist, trauma psychologist. That's why I'm here. because there's active child abuse and no one's doing anything about it. And so one of the features about sex abuse is that it isolates the child from reporting and rescue. And it just isolates the child. That's a classic feature of sex abuse. It's isolating the child from reporting and rescue. Guess what the parents and children has happened to parents and children in the family courts? They've been isolated from reporting and rescue because no one is applying the established knowledge to identify what the problem is, to diagnose what the pathology is, when the only cause of the child's symptoms are child abuse. And no one's bothering to identify which parent's doing the child abuse. In talking to this advocate, if you look at my vita, I'm not out of the family courts. Okay, I worked at Children's Hospital as a pediatric psychologist. I worked on ADHD and autism. I worked in foster care on trauma. I went into private practice and took one case out of the family courts. I said, it's narcissistic borderline pathology. Everybody knows that. What's the problem over here? And so I took a case to take a look and see what the problem is. And oh my goodness, this is my pathology. The trauma, child abuse. This is child abuse over here. This is active, undiagnosed, and untreated, unprotected child abuse going on all over the place, all over the place. And I said, for me, as a trauma psychologist in out of foster care, I've personally worked with all four child abuse diagnoses: physical, sexual, neglect, psychological. I've worked with all four of those. I have also personally led the treatment teams for all four child abuse diagnoses that have included CPS involvement. When Child Protective Services would remove a child and place him into foster care, they would send that child and the surrounding family to my clinic and to our therapists for diagnosis and treatment, assessment, diagnosis, and treatment. We're the CPS sent our kids. I know child abuse. When I came into the family courts, it's like walking into a field of practice where there are thousands and thousands of children being beaten with electrical cords, physical abuse, and no one is doing anything to stop it. It's like walking into a field where children are being sexually abused by the thousands, and no one is doing anything to stop it. It's psychological child abuse. But let me tell you, there's 4 types of child abuse in the DSM-5. All of the child abuse diagnoses are equally devastating to the child. They differ only in the type of devastation, not in the degree of devastation to the child. Psychological child abuse is awful because it destroys the child from the inside out. Physical and sexual abuse is coming from the outside in. Psychological abuse gets in the child and destroys who they are, their self structures. That's almost untreatable in adulthood because you have such damaged inside self stuff, this damage from psychological abuse. It's devastating. My 5 top worst possible parents, the worst. Now remember, I've worked child abuse. Okay, I know physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect. My top 5 worst possible parents: sex abuse, incest, off the charts. Number 2, narcissistic borderline personality parents. Number 3, the physically abusive, violent parent. Number 4, the neglectful, drug or substance abusing parent, depressed parent. Number 5, the unmedicated schizophrenic and unmedicated bipolar. So we're talking about my number 2 worst possible abusive parent. And if we take the sex abuse, incest off the charts and just look at all the rest, we're talking about my number 1 worst possible abuse. And it's going on all the time, undiagnosed, untreated, unprotected because no one identifies what the problem is at a professional level. No one provides a professional level diagnosis for the problem. And when I talk to people in other nations, England or Denmark or Australia or whatever, and they start to complain about their systems, I ask them about their healthcare system and about what century their healthcare system. And most recently, on this last conversation, I said, are you yet at your healthcare system in Denmark? Is it yet at the level of the 1800s? Okay, have we reached the 19th century in your healthcare system? We're not talking 20th century even, or 21st century, where now, just the 19th century, where you diagnose problems before you treat them. You diagnose rather than demon possession. At least you made an advance out of the 1400s. You're not talking a demon possession. But do you actually apply like medical knowledge and diagnose problems? Because this is a psychiatric disorder. Two of them. A delusional thought disorder, shared persecutory type. That's in the psychiatric book of diagnoses, DSM-5, ICD-11. That's the same category as a medical diagnosis. Psychiatrists are MD doctors. Okay, so we're talking about psychiatric diagnoses like schizophrenia or ADHD or autism, so major depression. We're talking psychiatric disorders. A delusional thought disorder, a psychotic disorder. That's pretty serious. And a factitious disorder imposed on another, a psychiatric disorder, also very serious because that's child psychological abuse. Oh my cow. The parent is creating pathology in the child to meet the parent's own needs. In this case, it's not producing a medical pathology in the child. It's producing a psychiatric pathology in the child to meet the parent's own needs. A psychiatric pathology that destroys the child's life. Please, legal system, please, guardians ad litem, mental health people, psychologists, reunification therapists, parenting coordinators, who's ever involved. Can we please get a diagnosis of the potential psychiatric disorders involved in the parent that represent child psychological abuse of the child, so that we know what to do to fix the problem and protect the child, please? Diagnosis guides treatment. Everywhere, diagnosis guides treatment. If you haven't diagnosed the problem, if you haven't identified what the problem is, how do you know how to fix the problem? Final thing I'll say, because this also drives me crazy. There is no motivation from any of the people in the family courts to protect the child from child abuse. If you want to, you can go to my website. I tell you exactly what the pathology is. I've given you videos, a diagnostic series where I tell you exactly how to diagnose a delusional thought disorder, exactly how to diagnose a factitious disorder, exactly how to diagnose a child abuse in the family courts. You've got free YouTube videos. All it takes is just watching them. Okay. I've got tons of material on this. You can actually schedule an appointment with me if you are like a legislator or anybody in the system who wants to protect children from child abuse. Schedule an appointment with me. I can tell you how to do it. I've got a booklet on how to do a pilot program for the family courts. Anybody who wants to solve this. And you know what? The moment you're motivated to protect children, the moment you're motivated, you, the professionals, to solve the problem, it gets solved tomorrow, today, because it's so simple. Diagnosis guides treatment. What's the diagnosis? We assess for a possible persecutory delusion. That's a mental status exam of thought and perception. We assess for the possible factitious disorder, that's by rule-out diagnosis. We assess for the possible child abuse by one parent or the other. We make our diagnosis and we put it on a treatment plan and we fix the problem. Easy peasy. But then you will encounter another problem, which is that none of your mental health professionals are competent in the diagnostic assessment of delusional thought disorders or in the diagnostic assessment of attachment pathology. So you basically have a psychiatric disorder that we're trying to treat with car mechanics and shop clerks and just people who are ignorant and incompetent. Google ignorant, lack of knowledge or information. If I have to educate a doctor about what the pathology is and how to diagnose and treat it, that doctor is not competent by demonstrated needs to be educated. And so you don't have any competent doctors out there, which is why there's a problem. Where are your licensing boards? Where are your mental health associations? Where are the American Psychological Association, Scandinavian Psychological Association, British Psychological, Canadian Psychological? Where are your psych associations getting parents and children in the family courts competent mental health services? Nowhere to be seen. No one cares. No one cares. Because this is a rippling sex abuse pathogen. It isolates its victim from rescue and reporting. And everybody else, the bystanders, have abandoned these children to their abuse. We don't want to know what's going on. And we just want to do what we do because it's what we do, and we don't care if we're participating in child abuse. Final thing. There's a specific danger with this specific pathology, a shared delusional disorder. And that is, if you believe the shared delusion as if it was true, then you become part of the shared delusion. You become part of the child abuse. And when that pathology is also the psychological abuse of the targeted parent using the child as a weapon, you become part of the child or the spousal abuse using the child as a weapon because of your ignorant and incompetent malpractice. Google ignorant, lack of knowledge or information. Google competence, or look at your ethics code. Competence in delusional thought disorders, competence in factitious disorders, competence in child abuse, competence in family systems, competence in attachment pathology. So with that, I'm going to go back to my work trying to stop child abuse without getting any help from any of the professional psychological associations, from the legal systems, from legislatures. No one else is motivated to stop the child abuse because once they are, it stops immediately. It's a psychiatric disorder. Diagnose the psychiatric disorder. Protect the child from the child abuse and fix the problem. Please. With that, I'm going back to work.